so we have done, because for me, I mean, we were just talking with Ben a little bit ago, and Ben was talking about how, he's got this half-acre plot, and he's got, all the things he wants to do. But for me, it was like 10 years ago, I was on 80 acres, and it's like, I want to do all the things, but understanding how much I can do in a year, there's no way that within my lifetime I can do all the things that I want to do. Therefore, what I really need to do is figure out how to do this community thing. But of course, I also went to college just like most people did. And during my college days, lived with other people. And as part of living with other people, then I got the taste of like, I don't want to live with other people. And so it's like, well, okay, so if I'm going to have 200 acres and there's got to be 20 people to make it all work out, then how do I get that to all work out? So a big part of it is to kind of figure out the community angle. How do you get 20 people to live under one roof without stabbing each other? Well, part of it is that they're not all under one roof. So you can have effectively kind of like a village of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And but if they're all so bonkers about permaculture that, one person might be the beekeeper, another person might have dairy cattle, another person might be a natural builder. Each of these different kinds of things to bring everybody together and get it all to work out. That's the big challenge. So up at the lab, we've got Ant Village. And right now, we have a few people that are doing what we call deep roots. But we've got, those people are living up there now. A lot of them have been there longer than a year. I think a couple of them are about to hit their 2-year mark. And I think that's a metric to be able to, excuse me. That's a metric for being able to measure the quality of a community and whether or not a community system is working.
Oh, yeah. Well,
having people that are there for 2 years or longer. Because when you visit a community and it's like, we're a success, this community is awesome, then how long have the longest people been here? 18 months. And it's like, most people have been here for 4 months, average. And it's kind of like, that's a sign of it's not really working out good.
Oh, you got to think of it like marriage, right? Because you got the downhill. You got to find something to kick it back up, because it's gonna go down a little, to make it a little more exciting. Yeah, what is it? 97%, I think it was, that I read, was of planned communities end up failing within the first 5 years.
I think, geez, I think it's 90%. And then, so 90% fail, I would say, within the first 5 years. But then when you go and you visit the 10% that made it, then it's kind of like, I think that different people might have different ideas of like whether or not to call that like success.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool too, because it's like different people have different ideas of what they would want from a community. And so you might go to a community and say, that place is shit. But those people think it's awesome. So it's a lot of the most successful communities that are around right now are religious based. And without having a religious base, I have met some people that have a community and they're very much kind of lovey-dovey in their community. And that works out really well too. And then if you go and you look at old folks' homes, it's kind of like, well, these people come from all walks of life, and yet, mysteriously, they're all eating at the same table for the most part and stuff like that. They're getting along. They're doing the test of time. It's working out. So it's kind of like, what lessons can we pull from that in order to have things work out? Now you're pulling up all these books.
There's a book I'm really into this. This is a subject I like a lot. There's a book I read. I was trying to find it, but oh well. That was really interesting. It was about planned communities. And one thing they mentioned in there, oh, actually, they mentioned it on the website because this came along after the book was published, I think. It was this holacracy. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
This is so cool. So, holacracy is a way of organizing or having self organization within a community or a business. Now, that's not going to work for everybody because one of the big steps towards holacracy is relinquishing control. So there's no dictator kind of thing on the property, which in some cases you might require, or it's just not going to work without that. But I think Zapier is the company. They just moved over to holacracy. There's a couple of other companies, big ones, that are moving to this holacracy style of managing. It's not even management, it's self-management, really. It's really interesting how it works. So basically there's like you're saying, one person's good at beekeeping, one person's good at whatever system, maybe it's the cattle or whatever. Basically you have those as your, I guess you call them departments. And then basically if you're good at something, you go into that. And you could be in multiple things at once, or you could just be in one thing, and you could change. So it's not like, all right, you suck at marketing, you're fired. It's like the marketing guy goes, I'm being told I suck at this, or I'm just not feeling right about it, or I'm stressed about it, it's not working for me. I want to get into the sales side or whatever other side, the beekeeping. And then they'll transition over into that. It's really interesting. They have their own constitution. See right up here is Constitution, and it's very interesting. So I've been reading up on that quite a bit lately, and I'm actually on PTV presentations. I'm having a guy come on and present on holacracy and everything about it in a community based holacracy.
Okay. Well, I look forward to hearing about how well it works, and I would imagine that for any kind of, I mean, consensus, of course, is the old school one. And now there's some movement to some other models for decision making. Dictatorship is what's been used for farms for ages.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd have to say that a lot of my own research starting in 2005 was along the lines of like, if you go into a consensus-based system, which is at the time was the most popular, and it's kind of like, what if there's somebody who's really awful there? Then, do you just put up with that shit? Or, if everybody kind of doesn't like the awful, then there can be an awful-ectomy.
Well, it's a consensus. So if everybody except for that one awful person wants them out of the community, you kick them the fuck out of the community.
Right, exactly. And then at the same time, I'm such an arrogant and obnoxious fucker. What if that person is me?
Then you're fucking gone, dude.
Exactly.
But that wouldn't work for you being on your property that you own, right? Because you would be like, no, all you fuckers are gone. I'm starting over.
Well, and now see that, okay, that one I agree with. And it's like, I'm, for what I've got set up now, that would be the case. If everybody on the property thought that I was a horrible person, then yeah, I would just kick them all off. I mean, that's the way it goes. But of course, what an awful thing to have to endure. And so then I came up with a system of like putting out podcasts, hundreds of podcasts. And it's like people can get an idea of whether or not they can tolerate my flavor of tyranny. Because then I think that 99% of the people that would listen to my podcast would think, what a horrible person. I don't want to be involved with this person in any way. And then it's like, I don't need 99% of the population to live here. I only need like, 20, 30, 40 people or something like that. So, 0.00001% of the population. So the podcast effectively thinned the herd dramatically. And then the people that are left are people that think that coming here would be the coolest thing. and that all the bizarre rants that I have in my podcast, they think are fucking awesome. And so this is the place where they want to be. So
did
that.
you have your own like constitution before you're coming here? You got to understand these are the basic laws of the land.
There's, I think more than that, it's like, okay, this property belongs to this crazy fucker. And he can make up any kind of crazy he wants any given time. And it will make no sense whatsoever to most of the people. And if it doesn't make sense to you, if the things he says in his podcast just sound like crazy shit, do not come here. But the thing is that every once in a while, there's somebody who's like, I've listened to all the podcasts and not a speck of it sounded crazy. It all sounded like the best. It all makes sense. So then if you come and you live here, you got a pretty good idea of what my values are. They're probably a lot like your values.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, now we do have times where people are talking about, because it's like up on the lab, I say, I don't say that people are not allowed to use any cement. I don't say that they're allowed to use no paint, you know, or whatever. Like, so I would say paint is allowed, cement is allowed, but I wish to seriously discourage these things because of my standards. And as far as bringing organic matter onto the site from off-site, it's like I wish to seriously discourage these things because I'm concerned about persistent herbicides and things of that nature. But for a moment, rolling back to the other thing, it's like there are people who bought land and then they said, now I'm going to switch it over to the community. This is going to be community owned. And like one of the first things the community does is to kick that guy out, the guy that gave him the land. Because a lot of times, you know, this is called founder syndrome. And so as I did all this massive research on all this stuff, and I went and visited all sorts of communities. First of all, what I discovered is a lot of communities, they don't have that much really interesting shit going on. And it's like, you know, I want to do the sepulcher thing, right? But it's like a lot of these places, it just seems like, you know, they're like, we've been here for 13 years. And it's kind of like, is that it? Just 13 years, this is all you've done so far? And it's like, I would have hoped that by 13 years, you'd get to the point that like 90% of your food is grown on site, you know? And it's like, you guys don't even have 3%. And so 13 years is a long time. So anyway, founder syndrome. I've met founders. I've met people who put the land in, and then they gather up a big community, and he turns over to the community, and it's a consensus-based system. And then they're like these really lovely, lovely people, and they are like, this is a beautiful community. I really love everybody here. Well, you know, except for that one guy who's always so type A. He's always talking about taxes and building roads and things. And it's like, why can't he just embrace what's here and now, the beauty? And instead of going on about this harsh stuff, you know what I'm saying? And so what they do is they all vote to evict that guy that's, you know, kind of harsh. Generally, after evicting that guy, the entire community falls apart within 3 months. But there are exceptions to that rule also. So my thinking is how do I go be part of a community and not get kicked out? So I want to stay there. If I'm going to invest, that's a huge portion of my life. How do I stay there? So in the end, I mean, I tried all kinds of things. In fact, I was part of a community for a while where I was not in charge, and I learned that they were lying motherfuckers. But it took me like 8 months until I could really be sure that's what was going on. And I thought, how can I find out ahead of time? I'm going to join a community. How can I find out ahead of time whether or not they're lying motherfuckers? And it's kind of like, that's how I came up with the whole system for doing what I'm doing. And I'm putting out the podcasts so people can decide whether or not I am a match for them.
That's a good idea. I want to talk about this a little more. Guys, I want to hear from you as well. Raise your hand if you'd like to chime in, or we can talk about anything you want. Okay, so when you said it, so you got this experience, you figured out, all right, I'm going to put out as much information on who I am and what I am into so that I attract the right people. I think that's a great idea. Once that happened, you set up, okay, I'm the sole owner of this property, um, but we're gonna try a consensus thing, and if I don't like it, you're all out, or how does that work?
All right, go to your magic Google box and type up consensus dictator hybrid and see if we can get this to come up. But basically, hybrid, HY brid.
Okay. Thought I had it there.
There it is, right there.
Oh, go figure.
Right. So the thing is that many years ago, I've got this online community that I manage, and we've got like 40 volunteers that keep it running, and so then I documented how we make decisions, and basically it's like 90% of the time everybody just kind of does whatever they think is probably best because they figure no one else is going to care, or they do care but they're going to agree with what's being done or something like that. And if it turns out somebody does care, then it's like, yeah, it's not that difficult to hit the undo button. Then for like 8% of the stuff, it's kind of like people might care, so you bring it up. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. Does anybody care? And so, all right, there's that. And then for the last 2% of this stuff, it's like, okay, there's been a debate that's been going on for a couple of days now or whatever. The dictator decides. So the dictator makes the choice of which direction we're going to go on these certain things. Ultimately, the dictator, gets to have a say over everything. But it's like, really everything kind of moves forward without the dictator, except for those times where it's like, okay, we got where we have a disagreement. We've got different people, and then of course everybody thinks it's awesome to be the dictator until you realize that half the population are sharpening their knives and saying nasty things about how they're going to stab the dictator. Because half the time the dictator has to tell people no. Like, okay, I want to do this thing, and it's like, but that guy's pissed off, he's being stupid, and it's like, well, I'm going to go with the stupid guy. I think the stupid guy is actually smart, and I'm not sure what exactly that makes you. So, but no, that's the way we're going to go. And so then it's like, oh, fucking dictator, what a dick. I can't stand that guy. I hate him. Hate. All right. So then this is the system that I've, basically it's what I'm using. And really what it is like, okay, for the lab here, there's the dictator. But I can't have people coming and talking to me at every damn little detailed thing. I want everybody to move forward on their own. But because everybody who lives up in the lab has listened to at least 200 podcasts. And so they've got a really good idea of what my values are and why. And so far we're having, I think, knock on wood, we're having really great success.
Says the dictator.
It's true. But on the other hand, if it sucks, aren't they all going to be leaving? I mean, I'm going to be by myself, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, what kind of investment are they making to get part of this community? And how many people do you think this system works in? Like, is there a max cap where it's like the dictator can't control more than 50 people or something like that?
I think that what really makes a difference is precedent. And so if you arrive at a place and you look around and you see what everybody else is doing, you kind of tend to go with the flow until, you get the lay of the land and you want to do something different. So you're saying, like, how many people can be managed this way? And I'm not really shooting for more than like 40. And so, But if everybody's listened to all the podcasts, it's like the amount of conversation we need to have isn't all that much. But right now, most of the people that are living up on the lab are either ants or gappers. And so ants are part of the Ant Village program where they pay, I think right now, if you wanted to be an ant, I think it's $900. And then that gives you your own acre through the end of the year.
Okay.
And then there's gappers who show up to help the ants or are part of our Boots to Roots program, because we've also got people that are deep roots. So they have an acre, but they don't have to pay rent on it anymore. They paid a larger amount of money up front. Right now it's $21,000. You pay $21,000, you get an acre. You don't have to pay rent on it for the rest of your life.
So now,
and then there's Boots to Roots, and that's where we have permaculture boot camp, and people come, and if they participate at this time for 18 months, then they get a deep roots package. They have an acre they don't have to pay rent on. Although I think it's on May 1st, sometime soon, that goes up 21 months. And so it's 18 months from now.
And if I own or am leasing part of this property and Consensus Plus or just Dictator says you got to go, is it at the end of my lease term? And if I own it, then what?
There's no leases. Either party can terminate the agreement at any time.
Okay.
Now, I think we haven't had anybody who came and like built a bunch of shit and then is like, I hate you, I'm out of here. But it's like if things went sour, then I could say, get the fuck off my land, or they could say, I'm out of here. And but basically it is stated in the documentation that any improvements that they make on the land belong to me. And so it's kind of like, but at the same time, I've kind of made it clear that it's like, okay, people are going to leave. And we've already got a lot of people that want to move here and live here, be part of this, but they kind of want something that's a little bit more turnkey. And so somebody comes here, they live here, they build a little structure that they live in, and they build some fence to keep the deer off their growies, and they have a garden, things like that. Then it's possible that they could say, I've decided I've fallen in love with a woman who's over not here, and I'm going to go to where she is for reasons. So I want to try and sell the things that I've made. And I found this person, Betty, and Betty wants to buy it from me for an undisclosed amount. So we've already worked out this transaction. And so now the plot underneath it, of course, is, now Betty just has to make a deal with me on the rest of that. But I'm cool with her taking over my plot, kind of a thing.
Okay.
So that's a doable thing. But of course, if somebody is like all like, I hate you, I want to kill people, whatever, then it's kind of like, get the fuck out. All your stuff is mine. And, whatever you could, you can pack up your U-Haul or whatever to get your other shit out of here. But I think that the idea that it's this dictator base, I mean, my experience is everybody's been great. Everybody's been really fantastic. I mean, I think the whole have to listen to 200 podcasts first dramatically thins out the herd.
Yeah.
And then of course the people that are left behind are people that really like the idea of being part of what we're doing here. What makes it extra challenging here is that the primary mission here is not to house people. The primary mission here is to try to move permaculture forward. Like, what is going to be the future of permaculture? And so we call it the lab, and it's about experimenting. And experiments come before residents. The residents are here for the sake of the experiments, not the residents don't take priority over the experiments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. The big thing that comes into my mind, or big issues that I think of, is liability for you. And then do you think that system stifles innovation and motivation with what they do on their chunk of land.
I think it does dramatically limit stuff because, you know, sometimes a person is like, well, I want to use a lot of paint and cement and plastic, and I can't. I mean, it's like living in an HOA.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in an HOA and you want to paint your house Dayglow purple, and the HOA says no, then it's like, man, I hate the fucking HOA.
Yeah, but it's different than an HOA, right? Because it's a planned community where an HOA isn't. It's not planned for like who's going to be there.
Well, what I'm saying, that's why I use the word like. It's like an HOA, but the rule set is different. The rule set, and there's not even a declared rule set. It's nothing more than crazy guy, you know. And the important thing is that there are standards, and for certain people, these standards are fucking awesome, and for other people, they're horribly restrictive. In fact, for most people, they're horribly, horribly restrictive. They're unacceptable. And so then we put it all out there in the flavor of these podcasts, and then people who are like, this is unacceptable. It's like, good, then don't come here.
That's why I did it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that we've seen people, there have been people who have come who are like, I'm going to be here forever. And then they leave. But it's like, and sometimes it's because, you know, oh, I love what you sound like in the podcast, but you're a really horrible person in person. And so then they leave. And it's like, that worked out fine.
And they figure that out pretty soon.
Yeah, that usually gets figured out pretty good. And it's like, but, you know, fortunately, there's a lot of people who come here who think that I'm awesome in the podcast, and they get here, and then they still think I'm awesome. And so it's like, long term, this is going to work out. Unless, of course, one of us changes, you know. But, you know, that's kind of like what marriage is like, too. And there is such a thing as divorce, right?
Yeah, yep.
But then again, they don't see me. I mean, the ants might see me once a week, maybe once a month. And so it's not like a marriage where you see a person every day. And so it's a lot easier to get along with somebody when you're only seeing them once a week or something like that. But your question is about, does it stifle creativity? Does it stifle innovation?
And motivation.
Well, like the ants, I'm going to say that the thing that stifles motivation for a lot of the ants that are here, I mean, they get their own acre, and they don't have a job anymore, you know, and they can just sit and watch the clouds pass every day. I think the lack of somebody cracking the whip over them is reduced their motivation dramatically.
Yeah.
You know, they do focus a bit on like what can make their lives more comfortable, and you know, what can I build to make things more comfortable for myself. They do focus on that some, and I think you know, they're going to do a little. I know they do a little. There might be a little hunting going on, and there might be some gardening and some wild crafting and stuff for food going on.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure they're doing things together.
But you know, you're like saying, does this impede motivation? And it's like, I don't think it's my rules so much. I mean,
it's the lifestyle change.
My values, which I am forcing on them in a way, and I'm not really even forcing them, but once in a while we talk about my values, and like, you know, how do you feel if we were to do this? And then we like, you know, kind of talk about like, well, and so every once in a while I say, I'm okay with you doing it, but I'd rather you didn't, and here is why. But you can do it. I'm not going to say no, But I mean, like, by our values, here's why I kind of like make a sad face when you talk about wanting to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's limiting and it's restrictive, and at the same time, it's like, how do we flourish with these restrictions? And I think, how do you flourish with these restrictions, I think, helps to define what the future of permaculture might be.
Yeah. I'm on board.
Okay.
So, so the next question, and Brian had the same question, or a very similar one.
I can't see the questions anymore.
Well, it's in the chat, but it is. Did you have to form? How did you legally structure this? So, did you have to form an LLC so that you're not liable for getting sued by these people? Or is that not something you want to discuss?
I'm going to step around that. I'm gonna say next question.
Okay. Yeah.
I think there's some things. There's times when it's good to just be discreet.
Yeah. All right. Understandably.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Mitchell, why are you guys wanting to talk? Raise your hand if you actually want to talk. This is all what the show is all about, talking. But if you don't want to talk, Mitchell says, Paul, that Hugo Culture article of yours that I had pulled up earlier is what got me into all of this. Looking for a self-watering garden. So there you go.
Awesome.
Ben had an interesting comment. He says, it seems a natural extension of Permies to have a form that facilitates the marketplace of people who want to make a life out of building, expanding permaculture, and those who want a more turnkey experience. He says, that's how I approached camp, counseling, teaching,
I think
builders.
I had a podcast. I've done a bunch of podcasts with Jeff Lott. And then he at one point said something like, there are different kinds of people, and people are a lot like plants. And some people are like roses, and some people are like spiky weeds. I can't remember if those were his exact words, but I think I remember accusing him. I said, did you just call me a spiky weed? And so, but basically what he says is that some are pioneer species. Some people are going to be like totally cool with camping and roughing it and stuff like that. Those are your spiky weeds. And then they make things a little bit better. And then your delicate flowers can start to move in. And I think that having diversity, so some people are going to be a spiky weed. They're going to be able to go into an acre and like, I'm going to build my shit. I want to build a house, build my hugelkultures. I'm going to build a fence. I'm going to have a garden. I'm going to have a rocket mass heater. I'm going to build all the things. It's going to be awesome. And other people are more of a delicate flower. And it's like, I want to go someplace where the rough infrastructure is there, and I can make it beautiful in a different way. But I'm not going to, I can add beauty to what you see, but I'm not going to build it from scratch. I'm not going to build very much from scratch. I think that, so they're still doing a lot of permaculture stuff, but they started with, they can make a house into a home. Yeah. They can cook. They love to garden. But, your spiky weed is more like, cooking is something to make food digestible. and you can build a house that keeps the rain out, but it looks like a cave.
What do you think you get more of?
I think right now we've got quite a few spiky weeds, but I think we've got a list of people that are delicate flowers. I think we've got a lot of people that are like, if you can give me a turnkey system, so it's like, a small cottage, very small, and a little bit of a garden area and a fence to keep the deer out, I will part with 20 grand to get a turnkey system. And
so you putting like tiny homes on those areas or what?
Well, I I mean, a tiny home, there's different definitions of what a tiny home is, but I think a lot of people would be very comfortable with a 400 square foot home. I mean, at what size is it tiny? I mean, I think a lot of people are talking about 200 square feet, and it's because there's laws where they are that say 200 square feet, you don't need to have, all these permits and shit.
I say a like F-250 can tow it with a trailer. Or F-150. If an F-150 can tow it on a trailer, that's a tiny home.
Now we're talking about, Airstream size, right?
Yeah.
And so what is that? That's like 200 square feet?
200 to maybe 300.
Yeah. So I would say, I mean, Allerton Abbey is 400 square feet. And that's pretty small. And then if you're going to I would say 400 square feet would probably be a delicate flower can make a 400 square foot home into a home.
Especially if and I would imagine a lot of times those are spouses, because you got the spiky weed who's got a delicate flower with them.
There's going to be a fair bit of that, but it's like that's the other thing too. Is a delicate flower. If you arrive on a bare acre, the delicate flower might be willing to camp for a couple of weeks,
right? Yeah,
but not for an entire summer.
Yeah,
and it's like so you've got to come up with something. And I think I think it takes diversity, but I gotta say that right now, I mean, we've got a deal where we call it the SEPR program, where people can come out and stay for 3 days, 2 weeks, something like that, in one of our structures, and it's currently a step up from camping. I mean, you can stay in a structure and it's really beautiful, but when it comes time to poop, you got to go over to the willow feeder, the Chateau des Poux. It's over there, and it's like it's a hike. It's not that luxuriant comfort that we haven't gotten that far yet. Hopefully, this year will be the year that we'll have some of that.
Do you guys have kind of like community barn raising events where you all chip in together to get this new person's whatever?
The ants do that a lot.
Okay.
The ants do that. It's like like a person might go and help other people kind of get, their barn raising happening. And then they tell all those people, like, I'm doing my barn raising on Thursday. I hope to see you there. And they do. They all show up and they do a big barn raising. And they'll get something up really fast. And so there's a lot of community stuff that happens like that up at the lab right now. But what I want to move into, and it's like I'm currently talking to 2 different people, and it's like they want to fill out the calendar this year with a lot of natural building projects, and so make it so people can come. We've got 2 levels. One is where we'll have an expert teaching a natural building course, and their level is somebody who's built a couple. They've got experience building it, but they aren't like an expert, and so we call those peasant workshops.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like it'll be cheaper. It'll be like something on the order of like a week will be like $200, and food will be provided. So probably the whole $200 is pretty much going to food, but.
And do they have kind of a community chip-in area where people are chipping in lumber or whatever, and anybody can grab it? How does that work?
No, I don't think it's anything like that. I think that there's like somebody will say they're going to go buy a unit of lumber, and they'll split it. You want to go halvers with me on a unit? But there's also, I mean, some people don't use any bought lumber; they only use wood from the land. But I don't know. It depends. I mean, some people, because I've said you can buy lumber if you want. I won't require you to only use wood from the land. And so some people buy and some people don't. I mean, there's clearly some people have expertise, and there is bartering kinds of things going on. Like, if you'll help me with this thing for an hour, I'll help you with your thing for 3 hours because I know that you have a lot of expertise in this, and I don't really have expertise in what you need help with.
Yeah.
You just need basic labor. I need expertise labor. So there's some of that kind of thing going on.
That's cool. That's almost getting into currency stuff, or it's on the cusp of that. If you start getting 50 people or something, you might end up with some kind of time currency or something.
Like, we got one called Fish. It's Farmstead Yield Standard Hour.
Okay.
And so we're using, this is kind of going around here as Fish. And so there's trades happening with Fish.
That's cool too. I could see conflict where people are saying, well, my time's worth more because my specialty is more specialized or whatever.
Sure. Oh, you could do that.
Yeah.
Oh, totally do that. Say, I will do that. It'll take me an hour and I want 5 fish for that.
Right.
And then the other party could say, sounds fair. Or more likely, fuck off and die. Choke on it.
Cool.
It's like, no, you can set it to be whatever the fuck you want. But I think that there is a certain level where it's like, okay, a person shows up, they provide labor, they really kind of don't know what they're doing, but they know a little bit, they know enough. And that's another thing too. I mean, this is something that I've observed, is that I have seen some people show up and build some stupid shit. Like, oh, wow, I can't believe that you thought that was going to work.
Yeah.
Like, and then a year later, it's like, they're very savvy now.
Yeah.
I mean, they've built a lot of stuff. I mean,
it's a learning experience for sure.
Yeah. No, yeah. They build experience. They get better and better and better all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that probably in 3 years, we'll have quite a few people here that have some serious expertise in natural building. And the people that have shown up already, some of them have arrived with, some have arrived more experience than others. And some just have some more, I don't know, figured out or something. Like they didn't have any experience, but maybe they read more books, or, maybe they just can see things in 3D better, something. And some people are like, man, everything they touch is like what?
Everybody's got their own skill set,
Yeah. Strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. You betcha.
And that falls along with Brian's question here. He's curious about if there's plans for, if you have kind of a common acreage where livestock is shared or anything like that.
Yes, absolutely. So everybody's got their acre, and then everybody kind of needs a place. I have learned everybody kind of needs a place where they could go and not wash their dishes. Let them pile up. Yeah. And no one sees it. Nobody knows. And then at the same time, they have access to the full 200 acres. Yeah. And so then do paddock shift systems throughout the entire 200 acres. The bottom line is that if you eat beef and you want to raise beef, then it's 80 acres minimum, but 200 acres is optimal. Because it's like they're a herd animal, so you need to have at least 5. And then there's the whole thing of like, oh, I've got 1 acre and I've got 15 cattle. Yeah, you're running a CAFO, buddy.
Yeah.
You're importing everything. And once you start importing, you're opening yourself up to like bringing in persistent herbicides, which fuck up everything. I mean, it's hard to have, your jungle of gardening beauty when everything's kind of stunted because you've got persistent herbicides in the system.
And you also run into things like slope. Like your sloped lamb, you don't paddock as much because they'll tear that shit up, especially in the summer or the spring and fall.
Well, you're gonna run the animals in different places based on which animal it is and which spot it's a good spot and what's the soil like. If it's really gravelly, it's like, oh yeah, all year long you can run them up there, no problem. That's another thing too, is it's kind of like, you're going to provide a shelter nearly universally, and except for pigs, all animals shit in their shelter. And it's like, okay, so you use a movable structure. You move it to a point. The animals all go in there at night. They poop, and then the next day or 3 days later, you move the shelter to a new spot. But you always park the shelter where the soil is really terrible.
Yeah.
And then a couple years down the road, that's going to be a green, lush spot.
So when I picture your spot, I picture very wooded. Is that not the case, or do you have a lot of roads? How are you moving the shelter in these woods?
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I mean, my property, and I mean, like, I hunted for 3.5 years to find this property. But like in Montana, for a lot of Montana, it's like cowboy country. It's like out of the movies where it's like desert like or
Right.
or it's big rocks, and it's like, how do those trees grow on those fucking rocks? And that's the kind of. But my particular property has amazingly deep subsoils. In fact, there have been several times that we've gotten out the excavator and we've tried to dig down like 40 feet, and we never found bedrock.
Nice.
So we've got some spots that are sandy. We've got some spots that are clay. We've got some spots that are a bunch of big round rocks. We've got like everything, which is another cool thing. This property is just magical for natural building.
Yeah.
Not only because of the subsoils, we have a fuck ton of trees. We have way too many trees. And we need to thin them. We're working hard to thin them and build shit out of what we're thinning them with. But we've got several different kinds of clay and several different kinds of sand. It's like paradise for natural building. All the materials just come right off the land.
Yeah.
So we can build everything out of cob, and then of course, log cabin, wafadi, any kind of log structure, stick structure, stuff like that. But now I was talking to a guy the last couple of days, one of the guys living here, and he's talking about he wants to do a workshop about slip straw. And I'm pretty excited about that. Just as insulative as straw, but it's like a 4-part straw to 1 part clay, and it ends up making something that has the structural integrity like cob. So as long as it stays dry, it's almost cement-like, and it's like, that's really cool. We got one guy that built a cob house, a really tiny cob house, and he's living in it this winter. And when he was building it, I was kind of saying like, cob is not insulative. How are you going to stay warm? And I talked to him a few days ago about that, and he's like, yeah, it's cold. You got to keep a fire going. Yeah, turns out insulation is good stuff.
Did you do a rocket mass in there?
I think he might, but it's like it's. I mean, he's got a Rumford in there now.
Oh, okay.
The thing is it's all cob, so it's like all mass.
Yeah.
And I think what he thought was that he would build a fire in the Rumford, and the whole building would absorb all this heat and then give heat back. Which I think it would if the walls were maybe 3 times thicker.
Yeah, or you had like some kind of metal sheeting or something you don't want to put on there. Yeah.
But I think that if he were to do this slip straw instead, then he'd have mass and he would have insulation. So there's talk about that.